Now, as Allied forces prepare to withdraw from Afghanistan, there are calls for Australia to urgently evacuate hundreds of Afghan citizens who worked as interpreters and security guards for our defence forces there. The UK says it's resettling more than 3,000 Afghan contractors, while the US military plans to evacuate up to 18,000 Afghans who had worked alongside American troops.
The federal government here in Australia says it's processing applications from Afghan citizens on humanitarian grounds, but it's not clear how many. Retired Major Stuart McCarthy served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He's written to Defence Minister Peter Dutton pleading for the urgent evacuation of these Afghans.
The situation that's unfolding in Afghanistan now is that there's basically a rush to the exits, which has been unfortunately precipitated by the Australian government and their decision to shut down the embassy in Kabul last week. So the situation that's facing the Afghans that we worked with for the last 2 decades is increasingly desperate. In fact, I received a message just overnight from a retired US Army colonel who's on the ground in Afghanistan now, pleading the case for one of our former interpreters. He's using these, or she's using these terms. The situation is getting desperate here. The US is about to leave. And this interpreter that this person's advocating for received a written death threat yesterday from the Taliban, specifically because of the work that he was doing with Australian soldiers, working with the Afghan National Army at a very high level, as far back as 2010-11.
What's been the role of these people for the Australian troops? What helps have they provided?
Well, the interpreters in particular were absolutely crucial to almost every aspect of the work that we were doing on the ground, whether that be with the Afghan National Army, whether that be with the Afghan civilians, everything from going out on patrols with our troops on the ground, very often even in contact and under fire from the Taliban, and right up to very high levels of liaising with the Afghan government and non-government organisations. Without their work, we simply couldn't have done our job, and they faced exactly the same risks that we were facing, even with our combat troops on the ground. Their lives were in danger back then. We had a very close bond with them back then, and the sad situation right now is if we don't get them out very soon, and I'm talking about within the next several weeks, many of them are going to be killed. I believe there's approximately 300 thereabouts of these staff still in Afghanistan now, and probably if you include their family members, we're talking about a figure of about 1,000 people. These people need to get out now. The Australian government needs to step up. We need to get back in there. The Australian Defence Force and Foreign Affairs, doing an evacuation like this is a task for which they are trained and they are prepared to go and do. And I can guarantee that the young men and women in the Australian Defence Force will be fighting to get on the first aircraft, to get back over there to Afghanistan and to finish our job, to finish our military involvement in Afghanistan on a professional note and to leave there with pride and bring these people back home to Australia where they belong after having sacrificed so much for us.
What approach is being taken by other countries who have been helped by the Afghans there?
What we've seen from the US, we saw the US Secretary for Defence only several days ago. He's directed CENTCOM to start immediate and urgent planning down through the military chain of command for exactly the sort of operation that I'm proposing. And that figure of 18,000 people, the figure that you cited just a moment ago, look, if the US can do it for 18,000 people, well, we can certainly do it for 1,000. The figure in the UK, they're talking about evacuating around 3,000 people, and their planning is already very well advanced. They've had a repatriation program in place that's been updated and dedicated to the needs of their people on the ground. Their government, their own Secretary for Defence has been speaking very publicly and very vocally about the need to bring those people back home, in their case to the UK. In Australia, you know, the situation that I'm seeing here is just ridiculous by comparison. I saw our Foreign Minister in Senate estimates this week literally shuffling bits of paper. She didn't even know how many visa applications had been made. It's too late to have those sort of discussions. The Prime Minister needs to step in and in my view, needs to establish an emergency cabinet meeting today and give the green light for the Defence Force and the Foreign Affairs Department to go and get this evacuation operation happening tomorrow. We only have, at best, in my view, about 2 to 3 weeks now when you look at the way that events are unfolding in Afghanistan. And as I've said very publicly, if our government, if our Prime Minister doesn't do that today and get this happening today, he and our government will have blood on their hands because many of these people will be murdered.
The Foreign Minister Maurice Payne says they are processing applications on humanitarian grounds, but what are the logistics of that, given that the embassy has closed?
Exactly, that's the problem. A lot of these people have been fighting, even through the court system, in some cases, after repeated rejections of their visa applications. We've got people on the ground there in Afghanistan today, even that gentleman that I mentioned a moment ago. It's simply not possible for these people even to submit visa applications. We need to be talking about physically evacuating these people. And the way that that would work on the ground is that the Australian Defence Force, most likely led by a senior official from DFAT, would arrive there on the ground and would basically, they would immediately conduct very rapid security checks, health checks, physically get them on aircraft, fly them back to the United Arab Emirates, and that's where they can go through the detailed administrative work and visa applications and so on. This is an immediate, urgent safety and security situation. We need to stop shuffling bits of paper and that sort of garbage with the visa applications and get a grip of this situation now, today.
Just finally, how could this impact future missions where we're requiring the help of locals in the same way?
Well, our international reputation is in tatters at the moment, and if we don't get a grip of this, our reputation will be in tatters in the trash can for decades to come. Who in their right mind would want to work with the Australian Defence Force or DFAT overseas if they know that we're going to cut and run when the going gets tough in future and leave them literally behind to die?